Videotaping this crime spree is the best idea we ever had!
Morons. Yeah, in case you missed it, one of the stories of the NFL draft was the slew of draft prospects getting prank called, with the most notable of these being what happened with Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, who not only got prank called, but got prank called by Jax Ulbrich, as in the son of Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Jax Ulbrich. I'm just showing Sanders highlights and not playing the video of the call because I don't want to give this fool any more clout. These prank calls seem to happen at least once a year, and they're all the same cruel, heartless pranks that show a complete lack of consideration for others and a disrespect for the work that they put into getting to this point. The person calls up the player to let them know that he's been drafted by a team, only for said player to realize that he never got drafted by them at all, and that someone, somehow, got his number, and he had been pranked. But what made this case with Sanders insanely bizarre compared to other prank calls, because there were other prank calls that happened during the strap, was that, number one, the person who did this was dumb enough to record themselves in the act. And number two, the person who did this was the son of an NFL employee. We can debate for hours and hours about what should happen in this situation, and for me personally, I would ban Jax Ulbrich from the NFL for the actions of his son, seeing as the man, as an NFL employee, clearly cannot be trusted with confidential information, and never should have had access to the material in his house in the first place, seeing as you're not calling up the prospects from your house as the freaking defensive coordinator, and all of these calls on draft day are taking place in the team facility, so this information never should have left the team facility. Plus, there are other professions where having confidential material like that out in the open can get you fired, and it shows a severe lapse in judgment on Ulbrich's character that his son not only felt the desire to do anything like this, but apologized by taking no accountability and spelling Shedeur's name wrong in the apology. Just a crazy situation. We'll see what the NFL decides to do with Ulbrich and this whole incident, but one thing is clear. Prank calls during the draft, unfortunately, aren't stopping anytime soon. But as dumb as the incident with Shedeur Sanders, Jax Ulbrich, and the Atlanta Falcons was, somehow, this isn't the dumbest prank call in NFL draft history. Seriously. Somehow, the son of a defensive coordinator prank calling an NFL prospect and getting it on video isn't the dumbest prank call to happen during a draft. It's up there, but it's not the dumbest. Because I want you to imagine a family member doing something like this. Imagine if, instead of the prankster being Ulbrich's 21-year-old heartless moron of a son with an IQ of -10, who somehow has as much power as you're watching this video right now to vote, drive a 2-ton weapon, and own a gun, the prankster was Deion Sanders or someone in Shedeur's family, and that person was doing it to try and lighten the mood and keep his spirits high. Something like that would seem nonsensical, right? Well, that's exactly what happened at the 1998 NFL draft with this man right here, Jammi German, for some reason that we're going to dive into today, because it truly made no sense whatsoever. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest prank call in the history of the NFL draft. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the community for you. Thanks in advance for your support, and with that in mind, let's talk about the forgotten phone call fiasco. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand who this man right here is, as in, the player who is going to be the target of this insane prank. This man right here is Miami receiver Jammi German, and to say that he had an interesting path to the 1998 NFL draft would be putting it lightly. After the 1995 season, German looked like he was about to take the country by storm. He was electric, and could take just about any play to the house with his speed, making him one of the fastest players in the nation. In 1995, he had 41 receptions for 730 yards, finishing near the top of the Big East in that category, and leading the Hurricanes in both receptions and receiving yards. He seemed like the prototypical slot receiver. You could give him a screen pass, and he'd find the hole and take it a long way, all while breaking a few tackles and leaving some men in the dust. There was potential talk that German could have been a first-round pick if he was able to put in a solid end to his Miami career, and it's not too hard to see why with some of the performances that he had. Then, everything went south, and German ended his career as a man with a ton of red flags, both on the field and off the field. On the field, he blew out his knee. Off the field, he didn't play a single snap in 1996 and 1997, not just due to the injury, but due to a whole bunch of other issues, including an arrest in 1996 when he broke into the apartment of a student, and an athlete who was trying to make it onto the Jamaican Olympic team nonetheless, and cornered and punched him, and then losing his eligibility in 1997 when he took multiple trips in a limo provided by an agent, then lied to the NCAA about it. For some teams, this was a first-round talent who made a couple of really bad decisions and really bad mistakes. For others, this was a man with a flag redder than China, and a man who was going to be a 24-year-old rookie when camp started, which was definitely on the older side of things, and a man who was nowhere near their draft board. The entire 2 years from hell, thanks to his poor decision-making, took a toll on German, who said, "I'm 23 years old, going on at least 45. I've learned so much. I've had to mature so quickly. It's been courtrooms, investigations, the NCAA. If you don't grow up from that quickly, you'll self-destruct." This is all to say that when the 1998 NFL Draft rolled around, no one had a clue where this man right here was going to go. Because how do you evaluate a player who's electric when healthy, but last played a game when the Cleveland Browns was still an active franchise and there was no NFL team in Baltimore? Some had him as a third-round pick. Mel Kiper Jr. had him going in the fourth round. Some had him slipping all the way to the seventh round or even going undrafted. This man was a true wild card. But that's when Washington came calling. Washington did not have a pick in the first round. They gave that to the Cincinnati Bengals to get defensive tackle and former first overall pick Dan Wilkinson. But with pick number 48, it seemed like they were willing to take a chance on German. Their receivers in 1997 were, shall we say, very poor. The most yards that any player had was Leslie Shepard, who had 562 yards, which meant that the top receiver on Washington ranked 58th in a 30-team league. And the most receptions that any receiver had, so not counting tight ends and running backs, was the 34 catches that Michael Westbrook had, which was tied for 94th in the league. Keep in mind, that's the cream of the crop for Washington. They could use some big-time help at that position, and German could be the guy to do that, especially if he played like he did to start off his career with Miami, where he was one of the most electric, flashiest players in the nation. German was off the board. And then, the roof caved in. Turns out, it wasn't actually Washington on the line. They decided to take the eventual Pro Bowl tight end Steven Alexander out of Oklahoma with their second-round pick. It was a prankster. German's wait for the NFL Draft would have to continue. But it wouldn't have to wait much longer, because a few moments later, as it turns out, Washington had traded up. They were infatuated with German's speed and his potential, and they were scared that he wouldn't be on the board with pick number 69 in round 3. Because of this, they traded up to get him. Once again, German picked up the phone, and once again, it was Washington on the line. And once again, it was a prankster. False alarm, he didn't get drafted. That's twice now that German thought he was drafted by the team that plays in the nation's capital, only to be deceived. Same person who made the call too. So what's crazier than 2 prank calls? How about a third? Because when we got to pick number 69, and Washington was actually on the clock, and German was still on the board, guess who got called? You guessed it, none other than Jammi German. This time was legit. This time, he was going to get drafted. No, it's a freaking prank call. Jammi German had been prank called not once, not twice, but 3 times by the same person, and all 3 times, that prankster pretended to represent Washington. Which raises the question, who was the prankster? Who was dumb enough or selfish enough to do something like this? Amazingly enough, it wasn't a stranger who happened to get his number or anything along those lines. It was Alphonso Douglas, as in his uncle. That's right, German's own family member was the man doing this and continued to do this until he was scolded. It got to the point where a few picks later, at pick number 74, when the Atlanta Falcons actually drafted him, German didn't believe it at first until he heard the voice of head coach Dan Reeves on the other end of the line. So why would his own uncle do something like this? Did he have it out for him or something? Nope. He genuinely thought his prank calls were helping. Seriously. Douglas thought that by prank calling his nephew, he was doing him a favor. Spoiler alert, he was not. The NFL draft was long back then. Teams had an absurd amount of time compared to today in order to make their picks, and they fit all 7 rounds into 2 days instead of 3. So Saturday was truly an all-day affair, where the draft would start at noon and would go deep into the night. It was a test of your stamina, I'll put it that way. And the idea for Douglas was to keep German on his toes. Said Douglas, he was anxious. I was just trying to keep him loose. In other words, you know how a backup quarterback stays loose by throwing on the sideline because you never know when the starter's going to come out and your moment is going to come? That's what Douglas was doing by giving fake calls to German so that he'd be loose, on his toes, and ready for the moment when the call came, and he wouldn't be thinking too much about the draft. And I gotta be honest, that is, quite possibly, the dumbest thing I've ever heard regarding any draft party ever. Seriously, who is dumb enough to think like that? Apply that to any other field where you're expecting an announcement but have no idea when it's coming. You're at work, your wife is pregnant, and you get multiple calls from your mother-in-law saying, it finally happened, the water broke, the baby's coming, only to find out later in the call that it's not real. And that was just a test so that when the call actually came, you'd be ready. Or so that you wouldn't be so focused on getting the call and you'd have your mind on other things. Seems pretty freaking stupid, right? Or you're waiting to hear back from a job offer, and you get a call from your friends saying, congratulations, you got the job. Only to find out later in the call that it's not real. I feel like it would have the exact opposite effect. By making those calls, you're now more focused on that call and more nervous and more antsy than before. It's almost like you don't want to eat your lunch until later in the afternoon, and every 15 minutes starting at 10 o'clock, someone comes in and says, your lunch is in the break room. At that point, you're going to be more fixated on your food, and you're going to be thinking about it, with your mind now focused toward what you didn't want it to be focused on in the first place, and your mind now concentrating on lunch when you didn't want that to be the case. I don't think Alphonso Douglas had ever heard of psychology or common sense before, because this philosophy of his truly made no sense. I'm going to try and get my nephew's mind off the draft by constantly reminding him about the draft and faking the fact that he got drafted. So now, instead of getting anxious waiting for the phone to ring, he not only gets anxious about that, but also gets anxious about whether the calls themselves are even real, while also messing with everyone else in the room at the same time and their psychological state. I have no notes. A+ draft strategy, 10 out of 10. Every prospect's family going forward should try that and see how it works out for them. Genius move. And unfortunately for this man right here, this was a pretty bad omen for how Jammi German's career in the NFL would go. There were 5 receivers taken in the 3rd round of the 1998 NFL Draft. One of them was Hines Ward, one of the greatest players of all time, who was a Pittsburgh Steelers legend that had over 1,000 receptions and 12,000 yards in his career. The other 4 guys, they amounted to just about nothing. Brian Alford and Larry Shannon were out of the league after 2 seasons, combined to catch just 2 passes. E.G. Green was done after the 2000 season and just 2 touchdowns, and Jammi German, while probably being the best non-Ward receiver from that 3rd round by default, didn't do anything of note in the league. Jammi German finished his career with 20 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns. And only 13 of those catches came with the team that drafted him, the Atlanta Falcons. German had no catches during that 1998 season when the Falcons made the Super Bowl. He only had 1 catch in 2000, and his 3 touchdowns all came in losing efforts during that disastrous 1999 season. If you want an idea of how Jammi German's NFL career went, this is literally his Wikipedia page. If you're watching this video, there's a 50% chance that your dog has a more comprehensive Wikipedia page than this. That's how little he did in the NFL. His uncle's idiotic prank calls truly were the highlight of his NFL career, and were this man's lasting legacy in professional football more than a quarter century later. So as a word to the wise to anyone, don't prank call players during the NFL draft. Don't be Jax Ulbrich or any of the other morons to get someone's hopes up and ruin them and destroy everything they've worked so hard for throughout their entire lives, all for some meaningless clout. But if you're a family member and you think you're doing them a favor by doing this, and you genuinely think this is a good idea to try and ease the mood and keep the player loose, don't do it. I promise you, it's not going to help. It's going to have the exact opposite effect that you want it to have. It is stupid on so many levels. You should only do this if you're prepared to be disowned by your entire family. Because in 1998, the number 3 not only represented the number of touchdowns Jammi German scored during his NFL career, but also the number of times his idiot uncle tried to prank call him. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.